Hello and welcome to the class on chicken ham pies. This is where your recipe begins.
Welcome to my class on ham pies. I want to thank you for taking the time to share my class with me. We are going to be working on uh, chicken ham pies, but you can do pork ham pies, you can do beef ham pies. The pies that we're going to make today will have walnuts and goat cheese and Parmesan cheese in them. And I will include the recipe in the slideshow because I'm putting this together as a slideshow. So you can look at the recipe. I will put links in the slideshow so that you can find where I found my information so you can recreate these pies yourself. So thank you for coming. And they're great to take to events because they can be kept served cold. They're actually really good served cold. So you can serve them hot, fresh out of the oven, or you can serve them cold. By having them in a cooler at an event.
So I hope you enjoy my class. This is one of the first times I've ever tried to teach a class like this. So it is a little bit of a challenge for me to do the technical part, but I'm trying to get better. So you're going to need about 1.5 pounds of either beef, pork, venison, rabbit, or poultry. If I'm doing pork or beef, I roast it in the oven. But the poultry I find does just fine by being parboiled and then cut into small chunks. I've never used venison, so I couldn't tell you about that, or rabbit. Um, for this, for today, I used a pie shell, pre-made because it was late in the evening and I was tired. Uh, but you can make pie crust with just some either butter or shortening. I tend to use butter, flour, and water. Make sure everything's nice and cold. The recipe that I saw said you could put pieces of cooked chicken on the top, but I didn't do that. 4 eggs, I use almost a cup of meat broth, a splash of red wine, 1 to 2 cups of the following dates, mints, currants, raisins, figs, ground nuts, etc. Now, I will tell you, I used finely chopped walnuts and goat cheese because those are the things that I like. But your ingredients can vary somewhat on taste. I used a quarter teaspoon of salt, a quarter teaspoon of pepper, and I use almost 2 tablespoons of portofort. This recipe is from Goat Cooking. Um, I do edit the directions some. I mix all the ingredients. I place them in a pie shell, or I make them in little hand pie shapes. I bake them at 350 for 45 minutes to an hour until the pastry is golden brown and the filling is nicely set up. And then again, served hot or cold is your choice. It does make about enough for 6 to 8 people. Your ingredient list. Today we'll be using farm fresh eggs, a splash of white wine, goat cheese, chicken thighs, portofort, which is a recipe I will include, um, which is a blend of spices used in the 1400s. To save time today, I'm going to use a pie crust from the store, but you can just use flour, butter, and water and make a pie crust. Shelled walnuts, and a bit of Parmesan cheese. Okay, so in the next slide,
Today we'll be using.
We're going to look a little bit at that port au fort or powdered fort. Translated, it means strong powder. It is one of the two types of ingredients that were used in 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th century. They were frequently kept in hand by the most elite chefs. These spices were quite expensive at the time, many of them, so they weren't something that the average person could have. In this particular blend, it was more of a savory spice that would have been used for soups, broths, anything that had that would have been more of a savory dish with meat. It has black pepper, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. This was originally presented by the Honorable Lady Aveline from the Barony of Shadow Stars. I did do some editing on it. Cooking the chicken. Cooking the chicken is our next video.
I start by boiling my chicken thighs. I like chicken thighs. They seem to be a little bit more moist and flavorful. I will boil them for about 20 minutes to half hour until they're nice and tender. I do like to leave the skin and the bone on because I feel it makes a big difference in the broth. And I don't buy store-bought broth. I just use the broth I make when I boil my chicken. So I try not to put too much water in because I don't want the broth to be watered down. But I'm going to let that simmer. Okay, you want to cook your chicken until it is what my granny always called fork tender, where when you poke it with a fork, it slides in and out nice and easy, and it just seems to really twist and turn easily. So if it's not nice and tender, you're not ready for it to come out yet. This is just about there. It's actually been cooking for a little over 30 minutes, and I'm going to pull it off now. And on the other side of the stove, turn off my gas and let it sit and cool down so that I can handle it.
Hello again. Next slide.
I start by
chopping the nuts. Now, when we chop the nuts, I do chop the nuts a little finer. I did say in the recipe that you could use ground nuts, but I kind of didn't like that. After I've made a couple of them, I decided I like a little bit of the texture from chopping the nuts. So here is chopping the nuts.
So I'm going to chop. Again, I don't want to make the nuts too fine. I don't want it to be like a meal. I want it to have a little texture. But I also don't want them to be, you know, too grainy and chunky where you feel like you're going to get stuck in your teeth. That would be yucky. I wouldn't want my nuts stuck in my teeth. And you're going to have some other textures with it that you're going to want to, you know, the meat will have quite a bit of texture to it as well. So you don't want your nuts. Now it calls for, in the recipe, a cup to a cup and a half of a mixture of nuts and cheeses. And it also allows you to put dry fruit in. I don't like dry fruit, so I don't put dry fruit in mine. But you can put dried fruit, make almost like a mincemeat pie, like Christmas time.
So, ready to go to the next slide.
So I'm going to chop.
And there it did it again. Making the filling. Now, this one's a little bit longer, but this is going to go over all the steps that it takes to make that filling.
We're going to start this recipe by deboning our chicken thighs. We'll take those chicken thighs and we're going to pull that meat off. It's a little warm still, but it's quite workable. You want to make sure you have a clean cutting board and you've washed your hands and your hands are nice and clean. Remember, when you use a knife, you always cut toward the board
to protect your fingers. I might pick at that more later. After you've got your meat all picked off the bone, you're going to take your chicken thighs and you're going to dice them up fairly small. And as you dice those chicken thighs, then you're going to put them in your bowl. Remember, a sharp knife is a safe knife, so we want to make sure our knife is nice and sharp. We also want to make sure we keep our thumb tucked so that we don't chop our fingers off or chop our thumb off. As we do this, we're also thinking about those eggs. We're going to be, in just a moment, we're going to separate those eggs. It takes 4 eggs, but it's only the egg yolks. You do not use the egg whites in this dish. So you'll be separating out your 4 eggs. Again, make nice bite-sized pieces. It's already much cooler. Now, when I did it before, I will tell you I made a lot more. But this is just for my husband and I for dinner tonight. So I am not making a ton for just the 2 of us. After you have all that meat chopped up into nice, small, bite-sized pieces, how to crack an egg. Well, I actually had to teach this. I teach this in culinary arts, so I'm going to teach it to you all. Remember, an egg comes from about 1/2 inch from the chicken's butt hole where this other stuff comes out. So you want to try to make sure that everything that's on the outside of the egg stays on the outside of the egg. So you take and you hit your egg on a flat surface like so until you get a nice dip in the egg. Then you're going to take and put your thumbs in that dip, bring it to the top, and pull it apart. And for this recipe, I do have to separate the egg yolks from the whites. I'm going to take and tap out that white, put that yolk in my bowl where I have everything together, pull apart. Now these are farm eggs and they are a little tougher than your store-bought eggs, but not bad. Nice, rich, nice, you've got a nice yellow yolk here. It's a nice color to your yolk. Lots of good color, lots of rich flavor in that yolk. There you go, there's one. Now in this recipe, we do use 4 egg yolks, which is quite a bit, but you'll see at the end, it really does add a lot of flavor and richness. And it also kind of keeps things from drying out. And it keeps things from, kind of keeps things held together. And to save some time, I've pre-measured. So here are my eggs. I'm going to put those in with the chicken that you saw me dicing earlier. I've got my nuts and my cheese here. I have my portafort or powder fort. Depends on who you talk to and how it's set. So in this dish now, I have my pork. I have my eggs. I have my spices, and I have my variety of ingredients. You can use things like raisins and currants, all kinds of different things. Those are what I like. I like nuts and I like cheese, so that's what I used. So I'm going to move these out of the way. I also have my broth that I have left over from where I cooked my chicken. I'm going to add that in there. And then I'm going to stir this. Until well mixed. Now, you want this to have a little bit of moisture to it. You don't want it to be too dry and crusty. The egg yolks do give a lot of like moistness to it. And as they bake, they really help to stick that together. But your flavors from your spices and your seasonings and everything really help that. See how we've got
It's moist. Like I said, I've made this a couple times now, and you don't want it to be dry because it's not going to taste good. You want that moisture in there. And the nuts are kind of absorbent, so you got to watch that your nuts don't absorb up your moisture.
Okay, and now ready for the next part of the presentation?
We're going to start this recipe by deboning our chicken thighs.
Stuffing the crust and baking.
I decided that because it's a school night and I'm tired, I'm not going to have time to make a homemade crust. Homemade crust is not that difficult. Just remember to keep your water cold and keep your keep everything cold, and have a nice pastry cloth. I have a nice silicone pastry cloth here that I use for pies and for cutting, and I find that it really makes a big difference because you tend to, if your pies stick or your crust sticks to your counter, then it tends to get torn up. I do have granite counters, which tend to be a little colder than the Formica I used to have, and that does seem to help me be able to keep my crust a little colder. So I do like the granite for that reason, but I always put a silicone wrap over it. Now for these, because it's already round, and then once I've got this cut into fourths, I'm going to take I'm going to take some of my filling here. Again, nice moist filling with your seasonings, your chicken, your egg, and your walnuts. Put that right in the middle. Now you're going to want to make sure that you seal that up nice and tight. I sometimes will have just a little bit of water here in a cup, dip my fingers in to seal up nice and tight. A little water acts like glue to really seal them up. I like mine very meaty. Now I've seen others who are not quite as eager to make them as meaty as I like mine, but I fold them up and I like them tall. I figure they look interesting that way. So I'll take that, I'll place that in my iron pan. This recipe is going to make a little more than 4. You do want to make it sure it's sealed up nice and tight. If you don't get it sealed good, it does have a tendency to leak out, and then they don't travel well because they stick and they fall apart. So it's real important that you get them sealed tight. Really pinch, pinch, pinch. Make sure you got water on your fingers. Meat lover, so I like a lot of meat in mine. So I'll probably make up a few more of these, but I'm not going to show that to you because that would be boring. I've got these pies ready to go into the oven, and I'm not sure if this is period or just the way I do it, but I like to put a little egg wash, helps them brown up nice, gives them a good look, gives them a little color. I've always liked the look of an egg wash. So I just take some of my leftover egg whites and whisk them on there. And then we just pop those into the oven where they're going to bake at 350.
Sorry about some of the technical difficulties I'm having. I think that if I do this again, I will do a few things differently, but I'm still learning. Voila, there you go. Those are the finished pies when they came out of the oven. You can also make them into a crust like that because the leftover filling, instead of making a bunch more little ones, I just made one big one. And then I cut that like you'd cut a pie. And it was quite tasty. We enjoyed that. My son came over and we had a lovely dinner. and we all enjoyed this dish quite a bit. So again, thank you for taking time. I do realize there are several little errors in the production, and I am sorry that I should have I was doing it all by myself. I didn't have a camera person to help me, so I had to try and get things at the angle that I could keep them at. So they didn't always come out as well as I'd liked. I also had some difficulty with the video kept, instead of going to the next slide, kept wanting to restart the same slide. So I realized it wasn't a perfectly done video, but I think you'll get the idea on how to make a hand pie, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye. Oh, and if you have questions, here you go. This is how to contact me. It's Lisa Krieger 63 at gmail.com.